You know, power scaling has always been something incredibly funny to me because people will invest all of this time in trying to figure out who's stronger, Superman or Goku. Meanwhile, Bugs Bunny can just literally be like, "Nuh-uh," and beat both of them. The bottom line is, don't mess with gag characters, especially when they don't even know what they're doing with their own powers.
Look what they need to mimic a fraction of our power.
Today's anime is called Witch Watch. And yes, the opening comments about gag characters are only tangentially related to this, because, well, it does kind of focus on some gags. An anime that originally started back during the spring season and has carried on into summer with a full 25 episode run. This slice of life action comedy romance anime is the story of Morihito Otogi, an otherwise average looking high schooler who's actually the descendant of ogres, and his new life as the bodyguard to his childhood friend Nico Wakatsuki, a fledgling witch returning to Japan after a long time away and being in training, all supposedly to get a handle on her powers. Morihito, or Moi as Nico quickly takes to calling him again, is happy to see his childhood friend again, until he's confronted with the fact that her magic is a little more than just inconvenient at times for several reasons. Nico's collection of spells is eccentric and very niche to say the least. It's the kind of stuff you would only expect a mage like Frieren to take an interest in. Basically, every bit of magic Nico has is some sort of eccentric trade-off spell that can't really be used for offense. There is no fireball, there is no magic missile, and there is no testicular torsion. It really doesn't help, though, that Nico is far from the most intelligent or thoughtful girl. And that's how this show sets up the major part of its comedy. Basically, it's misadventures as Nico and friends attempt to solve a problem in a way that usually exacerbates the entire situation. The cast will be presented with a problem. Nico will then attempt to solve the problem with her magic, and that will result in the issue being exacerbated and having some unintended consequences. This, though, does kinda match the personality Nico brings to the table. She's a really kind person at heart, and really means no harm in everything she does. However, she is an airhead who doesn't fully think through what it is that she is doing. In most situations, she's quick to jump right to using a spell without actually thinking about what might happen, like turning herself into paper, or using a spell to divide herself into smaller versions only to do the exact same amount of work, or using a shrinking spell on herself and Morihito so that she can eat a giant donut. The anime is heavily focused on comedy, as you can see, so I can give it a pass in a lot of regards by not being so harsh on it when it comes to critiquing the story. However, while it does have a main plot, its appearances are so few and far between throughout the show that it can pretty easily be forgotten that there's an actual story to this, rather than it just being a bright-colored Japanese flavored version of the Addams Family. Basically, the idea here is that there's a prophecy that Nico will experience some kind of disaster within the next year or so, and it is now Morihito's job to help prevent that disaster. It's so poorly defined and has such little relevance to the core of the show's entertainment value that it becomes hard to critique, since it really only serves to give the series a definitive end goal that actually lines up with the Magic and Monsters theme it has. At the end of the day, Witch Watch is really only selling comedy, with a slice of life romance as a side dish and a dash of action. The story not making many appearances in here is kind of inconsequential. And to that end, a lot of the episodes are really just focused on kind of one-off comedy bits, things that aren't actually a part of any sort of plot. So with that said, how does the comedy fare? I mean, it's good, but not the best. There are plenty of really good segments in this show, I will give it that. And they will get a laugh out of you, as they did me, especially as more of the cast is brought into the show. You go from just Morihito and Nico to having a total of 5 residents of the house, plus friends who help out in a pinch. They include Kanashi Kazimatsuri, an energetic deadbeat of a Tengu with a habit of wasting all of his money, and he ultimately ends up living with Moi and Nico to pay off his debts. Then you have one of the non-residents of the house, Nemu Miao, a shy fellow witch whose speciality is transforming into a cat and getting herself into sticky situations in the Otogi house. Then you have Keigo Magami, a werewolf whose transformation turns him from a wannabe loser hipster into a womanizing tough guy. And finally, there's Mahiru Kiryu, an incredibly blunt middle school vampire that comes from a line of priests of all things and wields a holy sword. But this eclectic bunch is the reason the show can be as entertaining as it actually is. The various personalities lead to a lot of unique situations that play out for a good laugh. For instance, there's a whole joke dedicated to ruining a YouTube channel because they used a spell to turn all of the guys in the house into girls, only for Keigo to accidentally unleash his alter ego in female form, who then showed her big personalities on stream. There's also the recurring joke early on that Nemu often sneaks into the house while transformed into a cat and ends up being taken care of by someone in the group. Or where Nico uses a spell to turn everyone into manga characters, or where she accidentally makes Morihito's head huge, or when she breaks his favorite mug to repair the window she just smashed, or when she uses the doublet spell to split herself twice, only to end up doing the exact same amount of work she would have done if she hadn't used the spell. Okay, maybe Nico is the source of most of the problems in this series. For as fun as a lot of the jokes are, there just are some that end up being a swing and a miss. And when it misses hard. There are some times where you get some real duds, like the running B-plot involving a student-teacher doujin team that obsesses over an in-world manga. These are probably the worst episodes that this show runs. The first time it happens, the show runs a completely unique intro and then throws you into this other anime world, and it almost makes you feel like someone uploaded the wrong episode under the title of Witch Watch. And this kind of brings up one of the big issues that I do have about this show. Sometimes you run across half of or a full episode that just isn't good. One of the major problems I ended up having with Witch Watch is that sometimes I don't know which witch I'm supposed to be watching. Sometimes it decides to switch from the witch that I was watching to something entirely unrelated to the original premise of Witch Watch, which makes me wonder why I even watch Witch Watch when there's no witch to watch. In which case, why watch Witch Watch when it has nothing to do with witches in those episodes and I'm not really getting anything out of them? The point I'm trying to make with my shitty language jokes is that there are some episodes that are definitely not worth your time. I don't have problems with side characters getting screen time. The Nemu and Keigo episode was pretty good. Kanashi has his own good moments too, for all the chaos that he brings, and the vampire Mahiru's bluntness is good for a laugh. All of their personalities together make for a good basis to this comedy anime about a house full of supernatural elements. However, there are some combinations of this that just don't end up working, and most of them preclude Morihito and Nico. It does good, but it decides randomly to just step away from everything that it had been working with into an entirely new situation for what feels like no reason other than to have two characters who aren't a part of the main plot stress over doujin, and I think that's a completely bad idea. And I absolutely stand by that unless this is going to be one of those situations where it's like Toby Obito, and then I may end up retracting my statement down the line. So the characters themselves and the comedy is not a problem with this show. Those are overall pretty good. However, it presents this plot that kind of convinces you it's relevant, then only shows up about as often as dad pays child support. Getting close to the end of the season here, the main plot feels like it's not terribly relevant in most cases, except in setting up this sitcom. It quite literally feels like it only exists as a justification for the characters and their powers. It's especially apparent as there's only really been like 2 or 3 times where the prophecy has been directly played into an episode, or an enemy has actually gone out of their way to attack Nico. The vast majority of the rest of the show is spent trying to make you laugh, and in a way that is completely unrelated to the plot. The humor is mostly on the mark, but like I said, has some major duds that wear it down. The character work is good, but the comedy element of the show is really the driving factor, so it's not like they're masterful bits of writing. And action is okay, I guess? The animation isn't particularly there, and fight scenes are sparse in this series anyway, so it's not like I would expect a crack team to be on this. Then again, you might also say something of the same nature about something like Ruri Rocks, and yet Studio Bind decided that they were going to go all out on that one. Either way, since the plot isn't really like a huge necessity to it, and there isn't like a whole lot of story writing to this show, I can't really say that it has a good or bad story. It's just kind of there. And most of it, like I said, is focused on just humor. And all of that said, I do like it. It's a funny show for the most part, with its fair share of hiccups and some solid elements that actually make for some good comedy. It does have a fairly lighthearted nature, so it's pretty easy to watch. There's not really a whole lot of like stressful moments to it. You can just kind of sit and relax to it. And it does end up with a lot of creative ideas, as well as a bunch of references to other manga or anime. So this one, in spite of the fact that it does have some core storytelling to it, is really just kind of focused on being as utterly silly as it can for the most part. That said though, this is all just the opinion of an incredibly pretentious and nitpicky nerd. So if you enjoyed this video, I would appreciate it if you hit the like button, and if you're not, the subscribe button, because I'm almost at 1,000. Please, just help me out here, okay? I could really use the help. Subscribe, or I will steal your dog.